I wanted to just share a little bit, just for a moment, how we met Rick and Michelle. Because Michelle came to Evergreen, the church we were pastoring, which is on the west side of town. And she just came for a little break. They were at Sunset Pres, and sometimes you need a break and just a rest where you don't have responsibility for people and stuff. And I'm so thrilled that she felt good about that. And I happened to be speaking that week, I believe, and I mentioned a church plant venture in the talk. So she assumed, rightly so, that we knew something about church planting, but she went home and told Rick. And so Rick texted us and said, I'd love to have coffee with you guys and talk about church planting and about my dream. And so we said, okay, how about tomorrow morning? This all happened on a Sunday and a Monday. Literally, it was that fast, 2 days. Michelle, then Rick, the next morning. So we met at Ava, down the one that's by the Max station here in Hillsboro, and started the conversation. And, for Jared and I, every church plant is an advancement of God's kingdom, but more importantly, and a part of that is that God is all about people. And He loves everyone, and every church plant represents a new force in His harvest. And He told us to pray for workers that would go out into the harvest, because the harvest is ripe and ready. And so we can't help but get excited, and it also is very moving. So yes, you'll see tears from me. And so that's how we met Rick and Michelle. And so when we hear somebody wants to plant a church, like we are there, yesterday. And so we just said any way that we can help, and that's what got things going. So it's a thrill for us to see what God's been doing. And it all started with the dream that God put in the hearts of these two people. And so we're grateful for them. So why plant churches? Maybe this is the very first time you've been a part of a church plant. Maybe you've never even thought of how a church got started. I hadn't until I was in college. I was part of a church where I got saved, but it already existed. I never thought about how did it get going. Well, I want to give you 3 reasons that we plant churches, that we still need churches, no matter what somebody might tell you. The first one is this, the Great Commission that Jesus Himself left this planet Earth with. In Matthew 18 and Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20, you can hear it. All authority has been given unto me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, and teaching them to observe all that I commanded you, and baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the ages. Church planting is one of the very best ways that we can do that. And so this is a Great Commission church right here that God's using. And secondly is that new churches reach new people. And by new people, I'm not just talking about new people from other churches. I'm talking about new people that are pre-Christians, people that aren't sure about God, people that are skeptical about God, people that think, well, He's not for me. They might even be mad at God because of previous experiences, all of the above. Pre-Christians, I love that term. We kind of made that up, and I'm sure somebody else has copied it since. But pre-Christians, why do we say that? Because we believe if people really knew the love of God and how much He cares about them and who He really is and experience that if they are exposed to God's love, they will want to become a Christian. They're waiting for that. But what do we think? We often say no for them, right? We go, oh, no, they'll never be the ones. But that's not true. And new churches are the most effective at reaching new people to a community and people that don't yet know Jesus. Except for this important caveat. That's true as long as they stay evangelistically focused. And I've heard Pastor Rick all through this building project remind everybody that the church is people. We always have called buildings the clothes that the people wear. And sometimes you need bigger clothes, sometimes you need different clothes to accomplish your mission. And so we celebrate this building, we celebrate this new set of clothes, but we understand that it's you and the people that God's already connected you with that are waiting to experience His love through you. And that's what this church is all about. And then the third reason, and to me this is the heart of the whole thing, is that it's the love of Christ that compels us to reach out and help people be reconciled to God in a church plant. Love is what compels every church plant that wants to reach new people. And Paul said that himself, and he was one of the greatest church planters. And you can read about that, of course, in the New Testament story of planting and all these new communities, reaching all these people. And in 2 Corinthians 5:14, he said, the love of Christ compels us to be reconcilers. And so I just want to encourage you. Those are the 3 reasons that Kingship has started, and you're a part of that. And then I want to let you hear just one story that hopefully will help encourage you to know that people need Jesus more than ever, and they can look perfectly together, or they can look very messy. We're all messy, we know that, whether we look good or not, right? Yeah. That's the key, though, because sometimes we only think certain people are really in need of Jesus. So, how many of you remember what it was like to be in 3rd grade? Well, my 3rd grade year was memorable because we moved 3 times to 3 different states. My mom left my dad and took us 6 kids to Modesto, California, where she was hoping to escape his addiction and his physical abuse. And so we moved to Modesto. We started school there. Just 2 months into the school year, we were there for 6 months, and my dad came down to Modesto and convinced her to come back and let's start fresh in their hometown, a little community called Sweet Home. So my mom said, okay, I'll give it another go, and we went to Sweet Home. Now flash forward to 4th grade. My dad has come home and he's beating my mom up. And I don't know Jesus, but I know that God exists. So I run upstairs to my bedroom and I threw myself across the bed and I just said, God, help my family. I know you can help my family. You see, we were one of those families, 6 kids, all of us great students, not any outward problems, living in a 4-bedroom house, 2 cars. My mom was a nurse. It looks good, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound good? But this neighbor girl, Dolores, didn't say no for me, and she came and knocked on our door within a week of that prayer and invited me to church with her. And there at that church, I heard the gospel, and several months later, in the 4th grade, at the age of 10, I said yes to Jesus for the first time, and that absolutely transformed my life. It makes me passionate about seeing people encounter the love of God and not assuming their stories when you meet them. Hearing their stories, listening to their stories. And, you know, my dad got saved 30 years later. All of my siblings got saved after me. My brother, the same year. My brother, who's also a pastor, is in Spokane, Washington. And interesting enough, they daughtered 17 churches out of his church in Spokane, and he was Rick's coach at his assessment. It was really fun to see how God puts people together. And I could go on and on about names of other people that God has put us with. Our first neighbor, when we first got married before the church started, was a woman who visited us 12 times a day, up to 12 times a day. Her name was Misty. She was caught up in addiction, 2 kids and no husband. Very troubled past. She lives in Pennsylvania now, loving Jesus, completely free of her addictions. That's why we plant churches. So thank you for planting Kingship, and let's make sure we celebrate Jesus' love for everyone all along the way. Here's Jared.
Kingship, you are needed. And if you're a guest today and just here because of the special occasion, though I'm like you, not a part of this church directly and regularly, but I think you'd be interested as well in how I think Kingship is so needed. Kingship, you're needed in Washington County in fulfilling part of the fullness of the Church of Jesus. Kingship, you're needed in Hillsborough and the communities around because our communities need you. And I think that Kingship is distinct and unique in several ways, but 3 of which I'll just quickly mention. First, head, heart, and hands. With the head. Kingship, you're smart. You know that, don't you? You're smart. You go on the website, there's a statement of faith. This is kind of fun. You really know what you believe. And we would meet with Rick and Michelle and Ryan and got to meet some of the other team. And we'd say to Rick, so what are you working on this week? Rick would say, the statement of faith. And 2 weeks later, so how's the planning for the church going? Great. What are you working on? The statement of faith. Now, if you look at the statement of faith on the website, it's like 4 categories. It's the Bible, God, gospel, and the kingdom. You know, pretty fundamental stuff. Probably wrote that in about 15 minutes. No. Rick and the team worked on that statement of faith for months. because kingship, what you believe, is really, really important. You're clear about it. Your head is clear about it. Your contribution to this city of Park is the clarity about what you believe about Jesus and the gospel. The second thing is your heart. You know, you heard the story. We met Michelle on Sunday, and Rick on Monday, and Ryan on Thursday. 5 days.
Yeah.
And within 5 days, Ann and I easily knew, in this little seed of a church that was just emerging in an imagination, we knew what the passion for this church would be. It's very clear on the website. You've all heard it. It was a passion to be a church that would advocate for, quote, the new widows and orphans, end quote, and would, quote, encourage men to be present and engaged, end quote. No other church in our region expresses its passion and what it lives for and breathes for in that particular way. Head, heart, and certainly hands. You know, if you're a part of Kingship, you are always told to get your hands dirty in love, aren't you? And already before this grand opening in this building, you've been so engaged. I mean, you meet at McMillan's, of all places, and you're engaged in giving to the Northwest Children's Outreach, and you had summer events in Rude Ridge Park, and you did community treat events, and you brought Easter to McMenamin's, and you are partnering with the city in how to outreach and to partner with and to help homeless in our area. And, well, Kingship, every week you are challenged to get your hands dirty with love. Why do we need you? Head, you know what you believe, very distinct. Thank you. Heart, your passion is unique among us in this community. And your hands, you have launched yourselves before you had a building, keeping your hands dirty. Not just within construction, and some of you have gotten really dirty here. Keeping your hands dirty in every way, loving others. My privilege today to introduce you to the founding pastor, and some of you are guests. It might be the first introduction. The rest of you know him well. When Ann and I met Rick on the morning of that Monday, I went home and went into research mode. We don't like to take too much time, but we want to be well informed. I discovered some things about Rick Terleski. First of all, that he was smart. The people seemed to think that about him, and I did too, and that was a confirmation. This guy is bright. That he was gifted. I had no idea about the range of his gifts, including artistic and other skills and abilities, and certainly with communication in a variety of forms, and leadership skills and gifts as well. Smart and gifted. But you know, there's a lot of people that are smart and gifted that we wouldn't want to follow, because they might take us someplace we wouldn't want to go. Rick, you're young relative to me. Of course, most of you here today are young relative to me. And Rick, you're not here yet, but there's a great verse in Hebrews that says, remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you, and consider the outcome of their way of life, and then imitate their faith. And Rick, I've had the privilege to know you for a couple of years, and I would follow you. I would imitate the way you do your faith. You're smart, you're gifted, but beyond all of that, you're called and you are a servant. I'm going to invite you in just a moment to welcome Rick here, but it was just so fun today. It was just this great little metaphor when there was some water spilled right here, and you didn't all notice because you were jabbering, but 5 minutes before the service started, Rick was down here on his hands and knees cleaning up the water. This guy's smart, he's gifted, he's called, but I'll tell you that he serves his Lord on bended knee, and his heart is always a servant heart towards you. Would you welcome with me Rick Terleski?
The only way that I know for people to engage that is with the good news, because I think it's the only thing that radically transforms us. I'm sure I could give you here are the 4 points, here's a book that I read, here's a lot of insight, or here's statistics, but all that kind of fades over time. The gospel is the only thing that transforms. And as a church, we're called to send that gospel out, but here's what I've learned through this process. We are all terrified of sending out the gospel. Because we're a couple things. We're scared we're going to mess it up. When we go and talk to someone else, we're going to I'm just going to ruin that person's life because I said it wrong, and now they're on a path where they're never going to follow Jesus. I want to assure you, Jesus is the one that saves, not us. We are simply to go and tell, relax, it's okay. Share what you got, all right? But the second thing is that we're terrified because, honestly, the world scares us sometimes. And because it would be easier for us to stay silent, tend to our own, right? But God gives each of us, especially men, gives us a field that we need to tend to. And there are people around us in that field that we must reach. And you'll be surprised what happens, because I gotta tell you, when I met Jared and Ann, I didn't tell them that I was going to church plant right away. I didn't tell them that was even on my radar. I just asked them, how do you discern things? And they're the ones that said, you're thinking about church planting, aren't you? I was scared, right? Because I knew what it would mean. It would mean for me to have to get up and actually work, do something, challenge my family. And boy, it challenged them. When we started on this, the first thing we realized is that we were living in a home that we were idolizing, because we said, what about the house? We can't, if we do anything different, we can't afford the house. So we may as well stay put. So we sold that house, moved in with my parents, sorry Michelle, and then watched what God did. Because he took us somewhere that I couldn't expect. And now I come to that point where I realize the most important thing I can do is to share that good news. So maybe we just don't know what it really is. So what is the good news? Well, the good news is John 3:16, right? And you knew I was going to say this because you're like, I've heard this my whole life. For God so loves the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. And you're probably thinking like, yeah, I've heard that forever, and it doesn't make any sense to me. Or it's just like, it's not very clear. What's love? What is it about God sending, right? Well, I wanted to tell you, that's not the most important Bible verse in the Bible. Okay? It's actually Isaiah 12:2. And it comes in the Old Testament, which means it predates John 3:16, but it is way more powerful. I'm going to read it to you. Surely, God is our salvation. Surely. His other word is, behold, God is our salvation. And I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. Okay, so it really is John 3:16, all right? I lied, right? It's like, but I think this one explains it so much better. Think of that as he has become my salvation, that God sent his Son, that he took on something that he did not need to, right? That we have arrived in brokenness, we've arrived in rebelling, and he comes and becomes something for us in our place. That he dies on the cross for us. He humbles himself. And he takes on the very means in order for us to be reconciled back with God. And he's my defense. And you think about like a legal sense of having a lawyer standing beside you. But I can tell you, lawyers work hard. They study, they research, they know the ins and outs, and they stand there and they say, I defend this person. And that's what Jesus is doing. He says there, and he says, I claim you. When we stand at judgment, he says, I claim this one. This one's mine. And his righteousness and holiness covers us. But it's not just for our salvation. It's not just for our eternal salvation. It's for our strength. That Jesus changes our very day-to-day. He's our absolute strength that carries us and moves us forward. But the part that sticks out to me the most is it's the Lord. The Lord himself is our salvation. Doesn't mean that he's found a way, like I worked really hard, I found a loophole, or I figured out the system, here's the answer. It would be like if we treated Jesus as if like an update on our phone. Every once in a while, we have to sit there and press the button, right? And think about, do I really want to update to this new software on my phone? But now it's just done silently for us at night, right? We put the phone down, charge it. Next day we wake up and it's already updated. Did it for you, right? That if we treated our salvation like that, where Jesus is just simply like, I figured it out, I sent you an update, everything's good. Right? That's not what happens. He himself is our salvation. Jesus famously said that he is the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say, hey, I know a way. here's a good way for you to be reconciled with God. You could try this. He didn't say, hey, this is my truth. Here's how to live life. This is a truth that I know. Your truth, my truth, it's okay, but here's mine, right? And he didn't say that, hey, I know a life, and for, a 10% tithe down, you can have this life too. He didn't set that up like that. He says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. Only way to God, only way to find redemption, only way to heal our brokenness, only way to know of assurance in this life is to know Jesus. And to see him as that anchor and that person that carries us. What I love most is that when you think about strength and defense, those are very intimate things. They are so intimate. To be someone else's strength, look at how about closeness you have to be with that person and how you carry their burdens. Or defense, how much knowledgeable they are about our life. Jesus is that beautiful strength and defense.